An old saying goes, nothing in life is certain except debt and taxes. Yet the only certainty about taxes is that we're going to have them and not how much they're going to be. So in today's episode, we're going to dissect a blog post about where you should think about saving if you're thinking about your future tax rates.
It's easy to get lost on the way to retirement. Things like taxes, improper planning, and excessive market risk can all lead you astray from your goal of a successful and happy retirement. That's where Liz Whittaberry comes in. She's a holistic financial advisor and the founder of Best Path Advisors, and she can help guide you to a better financial path. This is Retire on Your Best Path with Liz Whittaberry.
Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for tuning in to the show with Liz and I as we talk about how to retire on your best path here on the program each and every time we do one of these episodes. And we're going to have a good conversation about, is maxing out the 401k the wrong choice? You know, and Liz, in your intro there, did you say nothing is certain in life except debt and taxes, or death and taxes? Right? Because, you know,
death, yes.
Yeah. So, well, no, I thought that was actually really clever, because death is in taxes is the old saying we're used to, but I think debt and taxes is pretty darn clever. So
yeah, and that's actually the name of his blog post.
Okay.
Yes,
right, so
nothing
yes.
is certain except debt and taxes.
Gotcha.
But the saying is actually death and taxes, and so that is funny. I hadn't even really clued into it because I was so focused on the taxes part.
Sure, yeah.
Since taxes is such a big part of what I do, that I had not even focused on the fact that he had slipped that little play on words in
Yeah,
there.
exactly. Well, you know what, though? I think that's, it's great, because I think a lot of people feel that way right now. It's like, okay, let's go ahead and add that third one to it. It seems like we can't sometimes get out of debt. So let's have a conversation about that this week. So, Ken, what do you think triggered this blog and this conversation?
He opens the blog by saying that he had made this Twitter, now X, post that says, maxing out your 401k when you're younger is almost always the wrong choice. The extra 0.5% per year isn't worth locking up your wealth until old age.
Okay.
And he got a lot of pushback on that. And this blog post explains some of the things that he's thinking about why you would want to have money invested in other places besides the 401k
Just the
world.
traditional, yeah. Okay. So, putting a lot of money in or maxing it out when you're younger. And I think I can see some logic in this, but let's dive into it a little further. Let's start with why people, tend to max out the 401k to begin with, right? Just the basic setup.
Right. And we've talked about this in the past that, we're all trained to try to defer as much tax as possible now and pay it later, and pushing it forward into the future then lets you get that tax deferred growth. You've got less of a tax drag in the current year.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems to make sense. It's logical. It's what people have always done, except that when we started doing that, we were at a much higher tax rate in the past than we are currently.
Right.
And it's possible we'll be in a higher tax rate in the future, which is his point. But he gives an example that if you were making $100,000 a year,
okay,
and you max out your 401k, every dollar that you get into the 401k is saving 22% tax. And then if you need $100,000 in retirement, so that's how much taxable income you're pulling in from your different sources, then in retirement, that's actually $17,000 of tax that you would pay under current tax brackets, tax rates.
Okay.
And so looking at a comparison of, we've got the same tax rates now, we've got the same tax rates later, it saves you a little bit of taxes to do that.
Okay. And so you said, it's like always, it's a math problem, right? So it's like taking a look and figuring out what is the optimal. But again, the conversation piece comes back to, that was if the tax rates don't change, but they very well could. So let's look at marginal tax versus effective tax. Because you mentioned marginal. So what is the difference?
So your tax bracket is progressive in the United States. We have a progressive tax bracket. And that means as our income goes up, then on the next bracket of income, we have a higher tax rate. Now, I've had people say, I'm in the highest bracket.
Mm-hmm.
And when I look at their income, in reality, they're in, say, the 22% tax bracket.
Right.
And there's still the 24%, the 32%, the 35%, and the 37% brackets that they haven't hit. On top of that, a lot of times they think whatever bracket they're in, that's what they're paying on all their money. And that's not the case.
Yeah, that's a big misnomer for people. It took me a while to get that too, right? So if you're taking your money and you're breaking it down, you're moving through the things like steps, almost like steps on a staircase,
Yes.
right?
Right. So that first amount of money is taxed at the very lowest 10% bracket. Then you move into the next block of money.
So that's what, like
is
10,000?
taxed
It's like 10,000 on the first 10% or something like that.
roughly.
Okay.
And so as you move up, then you're paying a little higher percentage on each next bracket.
Gotcha.
And until you would reach the very top one, the 37%. And I'm just reaching over and grabbing my chart. The
No, you're fine.
37% is at 731,000 of taxable income or above. So, most people that I'm talking with are in the, say, 22 to 24% bracket for a
Right.
married couple. That means their income is between 94,000 and 384,000
Okay.
taxable income. That's after you take, all the things that reduce how much you're paying tax on.
Gotcha.
But that marginal bracket is what you're going to pay tax on that next dollar. So if you have, let's say, the 95,000 of income, you get another dollar of income, it's going to be at that 22% because you're in the 22% bracket.
Just the $1 though.
Right. But
it's a funny way to think about it.
yes,
though. Yeah.
it is. When you then think about, well, what is your effective tax rate?
Okay.
That's how much are you paying on all of your income? So you take your total amount of tax paid, the amount paid at each of those different percentages, and divide it by the total income. And if I give a real simple example, if you had 20,000 of income and the progressive tax bracket said the first 10,000 was taxed at 10% and the next 10,000 was taxed at 30%, then on your 20,000 of income, your marginal bracket is 30% because that's what your next dollar is taxed at.
Okay.
But your effective is 20%. It's the average tax you've paid on the full 20,000.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, that makes a little bit more sense. And I saw here on our little notes, we were just to kind of share with folks, you're talking about that person said they thought they were in the highest tax bracket. The highest tax bracket, in case you were ever wondering, in this country was what, 94% during World War II,
Yes.
right?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Pretty crazy.
The tax course that I'm in right now, the professor handed out a chart, an actual table with every single year. So I pulled that up before this morning, and 94% was the highest then. It was still in the 90s for a long time.
Yeah.
Yes, for a very long time after, in the 50s and 60s.
There's a famous quote from Ronald Reagan, and I won't have it exactly right, but they had asked him why he only does, I think it was 3 movies a year, or 3 movies a year versus 4, and especially when he was the highest paid actor at the time. And he said, because the tax rate is so high that if I do that 4th movie, it bumps me up into the next tax bracket, and I have to basically give the entire salary goes to the government. So why do it?
Right.
And
right.
I was like, well, I'm sure that was one of the leading reasons why he ran, the way he ran
Yes.
his presidency was, for tax, trying to be tax efficient and so on and so forth. So pretty interesting anyway, when you think about that, because I'm sure he was affected obviously as a movie star in the 40s there in the 50s with those tax rates. So.
Yeah, and it didn't drop. It was 91% until 1964, and then it dropped to 77%. Yeah, so in 1964, it dropped from 91% top bracket down to 77%. And we just don't have a real perspective on that because it's been much lower for a much longer period of time. It hasn't been over, say, 30. Well, it's been under 40% since the late 80s.
Yeah, for the top, right.
For the very top bracket.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk about why maxing out that's the point of the podcast this week, was why maxing out could be a wrong decision, again, based on his hot take there.
Yeah, and he points out that, if you're just looking at today, saving 22% marginal tax in order to pay 17% effective tax later on, that's a good thing. But that is true only if the tax brackets don't change.
Right.
The tax rates don't go up. And Nick points out in this blog that there are a lot of reasons that taxes are very likely to increase, in his opinion. And I would assume a lot of people share some of these. We know they're going to increase at the end of 2025 when Tax Cuts and Jobs Act expires, unless that gets extended. And it hasn't been extended yet. So we're very close to that point, barely more than a year before that expires.
Right.
But beyond that, our debt to GDP is the highest ever. Our current government spending is adding to that deficit each and every year. And even the current candidates, the spending plans that they have in place, according to the Penn-Wharton budget model, is going to add to that deficit over the next 10 years.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great point. I actually, talking about the GDP and things of that nature, Liz, I was just on a podcast last week with former Comptroller General David Walker, and he was pointing out a number of places where, obviously the question was around taxation. Can we tax our way back to fiscal responsibility with this $35 trillion in debt we have? And he's like, no, it's not the only source, right? They're going to have to cut government spending as well. So there's a lot of stuff in the air that's going to make, he said the next, 10 years are going to be quite challenging. And I mean, this guy would know, right?
Yeah, I think he's got a book on this, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So interesting stuff, because he was the Comptroller General, actually Reagan, Bush, and Clinton, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah.
Yeah, I read his book a long time ago, and he's very insightful on the issues. But talking about the government spending, 50% of the current budget is spent on the entitlement programs, the Social Security and Medicare, and that makes it hard to cut spending.
Yeah, 50. That was a big 50, you said. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So,
yeah. And so if you think taxes are going to go up, this is Nick's main point, why would you want to put more money into a vehicle that will be taxed at the rate that's set in the future by a future government that you don't even know who they are today?
Right. And you're going to be retired for 30 years. You're going to see multiple administrations. So think about that too. Right.
And he says that if tax rates go up by 10%, then the benefits of deferring in that 401k or other tax deferred plan disappears. That extra 10% tax takes away the benefit that you gained by deferring to the future. So that's not a big tax increase to lose your benefit for having deferred your taxes to the future.
Right. Okay.
The other very interesting thing is he quotes Ed Slott, and I'm sure you know who Ed Slott is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And Ed Slott has written a number of books.
He's the IRA guy, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
A CPA, very highly educated, does a lot of training in this area, educating consumers and advisors.
Right.
So he's very focused on educating everybody across the board. In his latest book, The Retirement Savings Time Bomb Ticks Louder, he says, whether your retirement is 5 years away or 50, the single greatest threat standing in your way is taxes. Unlike losses experienced in the stock market, money lost to taxes never recovers.
Right. Very true. Very true. So some great, interesting points. And I think that's one of the reasons why you see so many advisors and financial professionals, Liz, talking about, doing Roth conversions now, right? Converting money from a 401k or a traditional IRA over to the Roth side of things. And of course, they even did that with the Secure Act passing, where they've now made, Roth 401ks are starting to happen more and more in more companies as well, possibly for this reason, because we know the tax rates. It's sort of the devil that you know now versus what we don't know later. So when you think about all that, what's your takeaway from all this?
Well, I would say that no matter your age and stage in life, just building off of what you just said, everybody has got to consider how much they want to defer to the future, to these unknown tax rates, and how much they want to take control of now. You really want to take control of your lifetime tax bill and make sure that you're not blindly just maxing out the traditional 401k to save money today, or allowing the money to just continue to sit in those traditional accounts and continue to build wealth inside of that bucket that hasn't been taxed yet. You want to step back and say, should I just get the match and put the money elsewhere? Begin to save in some other vehicles that don't have this future tax hit? Should I take some distributions to spend as income? Should I do some Roth conversions? What things can I do to really take control of this lifetime tax bill and make sure that if tax rates go up in the future by a lot more than I'm thinking today, that I haven't exposed myself to that risk unnecessarily. I've really got myself in a good position. So that takes putting a plan together.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the strong focuses that you take with clients as well, right? Is the taxation conversation, because it is going to be such an animal there.
It is, and I have walked through this question with every single client. How much should you keep in your IRA?
Mm-hmm.
And we look at, filling up the lowest brackets and being able to do some charitable giving with QCDs, some things like that. And then over and above that, what can we do to get the rest of the money out of that, that future tax risk, reduce that risk in the future and minimize that lifetime tax bill, and have been able to help people get themselves in a position where it significantly improves their future picture.
Well, yeah, because you can go back. We started with the classic saying, right, of death and taxes, or even debt and taxes, and you can kind of finish with the classic saying of it's not what you make, it's what you keep, right? So there's that other one, and when you think about that, it's what you keep. So your taxation strategy or lack thereof can really make or break a retirement plan. And that's why it's really important to sit down and spend time with a qualified professional like Liz so that you can retire on your best path. So if you need some help, reach out to her, please, at bestpathadvisors.com. We'll put links, by the way, into the article in this week's show notes for you to check out if you'd like to check that out for yourself. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, Retire on Your Best Path, on Apple or Spotify or YouTube. Check out Liz's YouTube channel. A lot of good content there as well. When you're on her website, you can just go to The Good Stuff, and you can find all that stuff right there for you to in one easy place to access. So you can check out webinars, videos, blog, all that stuff. So go check it out at bestpathadvisors.com. Any final thoughts before we go, Liz?
I would just say, happy tax planning. You got to do it now.
Yeah, that's true, right? Well, it is at the time we're taping this, and this will come out the last week of September. It'll be the first of the year before you know it, right? So the holiday season, fourth quarter will fly by, and as we like to talk about on shows like this as well, it's not just tax prep. It's not just the annual thing we have to get ready for, right? Especially as you're starting to get closer to retirement. Tax planning is really important.
Yeah, and the final quarter is when I really do a lot of the Roth, looking at the year and making sure we make the most of it.
There you go. All the more reason to reach out to Liz if you've got some questions about doing some conversions or just your tax situation in general so that you can retire on your best path. We'll see you next time here on the podcast. And don't forget to subscribe to us on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Catch you later. Bye-bye.
The preceding program is sponsored by Best Path Advisors, which is solely responsible for its content. Securities offered through J.W. Cole Financial, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advice offered through J.W. Cole Advisors. Best Path Advisors, J.W. Cole Financial, and J.W. Cole Advisors are unaffiliated entities. The opinions expressed by Liz Whitberry should not be construed as specific tax, legal, or investment advice, nor as an offer to buy or sell any securities mentioned herein. Neither J.W. Cole Financial nor its representatives provide legal, tax, or accounting advice. Persons who provide such advice do so in a capacity other than as a registered representative of J.W. Cole. Investing is subject to risks, including the loss of principal. Due to volatility within the markets mentioned, opinions are subject to change without notice. Information is based on sources believed to be reliable, however, their accuracy or completeness cannot be guaranteed.